Hi guys, this is Katie. I am going to talk about my literacy activity number 1 on graphic novels. Um, I was really actually impressed by the novels that I read. I really liked Persepolis and I really liked El Defo that I picked on my own. I was surprised because I never really liked graphic novels before, but I really got into it this unit and I'm glad I tried it out because now I really am excited to incorporate it into my classroom and show my students how amazing books can be. For part 1 of this, I chose 3 books. I chose Walk Two Moons for my first one because it is my all-time favorite book, hands down. I read it every year to my kids. I read it once or twice a year for myself because it's just an amazing novel. So talking about the cover, I thought that the moon and the scenery really stood out for this. Now, when I read this book, I don't picture what I see on the cover, so I figured if I did do an activity like we had to do in class, I would have the students change it according to how they think it's supposed to be. I did like that they put the Newbery medal on it. It totally deserves that medal, so I feel like people should know that this is an amazing book. When I first looked at this cover before I read the book, there's actually 2 different covers to this, but this is the copy that I have. And I wasn't sure what to expect at first. It kind of looked like she lived in farmland, which is true for at least some of the book. But I wasn't sure how moons came into this. I wasn't sure if it was something about space, maybe. It actually ended up being something totally different, and it makes sense once you read the book, when you realize what the moon represents. I really think that this is an interesting cover. I think that a lot of students would be into this kind of thing. It's really important to have a cover that pulls the reader in because that's the first thing that students see. I have a lot of students that come into my classroom and look at my classroom library, pick up a book, and put it back because the cover was boring. And I don't blame them. I did the same thing when I was younger. So I think it's important to get students into reading books even if the cover isn't interesting to them, so then they can really look at it and read it and say, okay, well, I would do this differently. Maybe it would be better for this cover to look like this, and so on. The second book was El Defo by C.C. Bell. This is the book I read for my graphic novel for this unit, and I absolutely loved it. This is the cover that I redid in the next few slides, and I thought the cover was a little misleading, to be honest. I understood at first that she was deaf, but I really thought it was about a superhero. And there's only small parts in this novel about her being a superhero, and it's kind of undercover. Like, it's something in her head, it's not real. Nobody else knows about it except for her. But I do think that kids would look at this and say, oh, I love superheroes. I would want to read this. And I think that they would like it. It wouldn't be exactly what they thought it was going to be, but I think they would enjoy it. I also think that students would think that it was kind of in a Spanish language because, El Defo kind of sounds Spanish. And I think that would maybe turn some students off if they thought it wasn't going to be in English. At first, I was kind of thinking about what was on her chest. I wasn't completely sure. Right here, it kind of looks like a box that you can see. I've never seen that before, so I guess I felt bad at first because I wasn't sure what it was until I started really reading it. But then I did notice, or I read the back of the book and I looked up what it was going to be about, so I knew ahead of time. But it made a lot more sense once I started reading it. So down here, the predictions about the text, I was thinking about a superhero that had a hearing impairment and showed everything was going to be all right. It didn't end up turning out to be that way. It was completely different, but it was still amazing in every way. I really enjoyed this book. The cover is important, I think, because it shows students that you can be anything no matter who you are. I really think that if the students looked at this, they would think, okay, well, she's deaf and she's a superhero, so that really means that I can do anything, even if, maybe they have a learning disability or they're in a wheelchair or something like that. This book is actually a book that I picked for the next unit. Out of the Dust. And I have never read this before, and I was actually very turned off by the cover of this book. I'm not a huge history buff. I'm really not into it. I'm more of a math girl. So when I looked at this, I was like, I really don't know if I like it, but I had it in my classroom library, and I said I was going to give it a chance. If I have it in my classroom library, I try to read as much books as I have. So if my students ask about it, I know it. And I'm really glad that I read this book. This book was absolutely amazing. It went really into depth about the Dust Bowl and how families struggle through the entire process, and especially this one little girl in this book who struggles throughout the entire time with death and not having money and trying to succeed with her music, and learning to cope with her father. And it was just fantastic, and I would recommend it to anybody. When you first look at this cover, I first noticed that it was in black and white, so I automatically knew that it was an older version. It's definitely set back later in time instead of now. She's wearing a straw hat, which means that she might be poor. She doesn't have a lot of clothes to wear, and stuff like that. At first, when I looked at it, I was thinking, will this book be sad? Is it about a girl surviving on their own? Does she have a family? It doesn't really tell you much in the cover, which is kind of nice at the same time because you don't want to give the whole book away. But it does leave you with questions, which makes you want to go into the book and read it more. I figured that it was about the Dust Bowl. I've heard about it before during college and throughout my high school career. I kind of learned about this book, but I just was never interested in reading it until now. This cover is very important because it tells you many clues, I guess, with what's going to be in the novel, especially with the title. You know that it's from the Dust Bowl, and you can tell that this family is poor and they might live on a farm if that's a barn behind her, so it kind of gives them clues as they go. So for my redesign cover, I really liked the original cover, but I thought it was kind of misleading, and I wanted readers to be able to look at a different point of view. So you can see over here, I kind of took the top picture as best as I could and put it on the top half of my new cover, which I wanted to keep because her superhero side is a big part of the story. She kind of resorts to that when things are tough and she needs somebody to talk to. But I wanted people to know at the bottom also that she's also a younger girl that goes to school, and she struggles a lot with friends and trying to see, if they can accept her for who she is with her hearing impairment and with her hearing aids at school. So I tried to incorporate that as best as I could. I'm not the best artist, so I probably could have put a little more detail into it, but again, I didn't really want to ruin it. I wanted to make a point of having two different sides of the story as well. So like I said, I would split the cover in half like I did. The bottom half would show you more of school. The top half would show you of more her superhero side, which is what she resorts to when she's having a hard time. There's a lot of characters in the book that kind of give her a hard time. Not necessarily bully. Some of them do, but a few of them don't understand, and they try to talk loud at her just because she has hearing aids, and they try to baby her and kind of tell her what to do just because of her hearing impairment, and she, instead of telling them how she feels, she kind of resorts to talking about her superhero side and how she wishes she could do it. How will this get students excited? So this would make students want to look at other books. They'll pick out covers that they find interesting. I would hold a book tasting. If I was going to do this activity, I would have students pick a book that they read. I would probably pick 40, 50 books from my book library and have them choose a book that they want to read, and then we would read it when we have time in class, or they can bring it home to read, and then I would have them recreate the cover of that book. Now, I would make sure there were books that I've read, so they would incorporate, the correct information into the new cover. But I think this would get them excited to look at more books in the future, especially if they've never read this book before and they didn't like the cover. Maybe they picked one that they didn't like and they said, they ended up really liking it once they read it. And so when they got to redesign their new cover, maybe they wanted to pick a different book that maybe they didn't like the cover and they wanted to try again to see if they might like it. This will definitely demonstrate knowledge of text. I mean, you need to be able to read it in order to figure out what the new cover is going to look like. You have to incorporate maybe characters and the theme and the genre. You have to focus on the tone and the setting of the book. You know, if it's the settings on a beach, you don't want to put it in a basketball court. So they really need to know what's in this text and how to incorporate the different parts of the novel into the cover. So my alternate literacy activity, I chose to have the students create their own comic strip with this book. And I did this because in the book, Cece often tells people how she feels, or she wants to tell people how she feels, but she stops herself because she's afraid that they're not going to be friends with her anymore. And so I want a student to pick a part in the book. There's many of them, probably 15. I would like them to pick a section where they can rewrite, where Cece is going to stick up for herself and she's going to tell her friends how she feels in a nice way and tell them that, you know, yes, I have a hearing impairment. Yes, sometimes I have trouble, but no, you don't have to talk to me differently. You don't have to do this and that and on and on. And I think it's important to especially rewrite a part of a story that they think, you know, according to their character. And if they do pick Cece, you know, I mean, they will, but they would have to pick different characters with her, either whether her friends or her teachers or her parents. So I think it's important for them to know what the setting is during that time, the page that they're on, the color, the details of the friends and stuff like that. So I think it would be really cool for them to do that. After they get done with the comic strip, I'm going to have them write a page-long response explaining their comic strip. They will reference the scene of the book, the setting, characters, and the situation Cece's in. They must also add how she sticks up for herself and explains to her friends what is bothering her. So this gives me a chance to see how they interpreted the text themselves. So if they pick a certain spot of the book and they say, okay, I'm going to rewrite this section. So originally the beginning part is going to be the same because Cece's going to be in that specific situation. But then I want them to write about, not only in their comic strip, but in their page-long response to me, how they interpreted the text, how they rewrote it to make Cece stick up for herself and have, you know, essentially El Defo come and save the day. So this shows me that they really understood the text, they understood the setting and where the situation Cece's in and the characters that are around her and how she feels on the inside. So I really think that this idea is exciting, and especially because I teach 5th grade, my students love graphic novels. And I read this one with my students. And I actually haven't had a chance with this week being so busy to do the final assessment with it. But I will, and I'm going to do this comic strip. So I'm excited to see how it goes. I hope you guys liked my presentations. Feel free to ask me any questions if you need to. And thanks for listening.